Welcome back to Riders of the Dawn. This is Stu.
This is Jay.
And we're going to talk about The Hobbit, the movie adaptations of a 95,000 word book by Peter Jackson. If you want a good adaptation of The Hobbit, believe it or not, that really crappy cartoon from the 70s
was really good.
It was really good. It was really accurate, and it told a really good story. And it actually had a correct characterization of Bilbo, and the story was accurate to the book, and it was fun, and even had little sing-songs in it.
Yeah.
Which
the book has lots of poetry and sing-songs.
Yeah, it has poetry and songs in it, so it's in that case it's a lot closer to the book, and it's a much bigger sense of adventure with that particular movie versus the movies, which are just kind of all over the place.
Yeah, so
really all over the place.
If you listen to our Lord of the Rings trilogy discussion, you get the sense that we liked it. I liked it.
Yeah, I liked the Lord of the Rings movies as well. I don't think they're perfect.
I'm going to tell you right now, I only watched the first Hobbit movie because it was so bad I couldn't go back for the second two. I just couldn't do it. It was so bad.
I watched the second two on video with my wife and
couldn't do it.
Each one we watched, we're just like, it got worse. I'm like, what were they thinking?
I watched the first one on video because
there's this parallel between Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. The original Star Wars trilogy is really good. And then you have this prequel trilogy where you're like, well, there's good elements to it, right? And that's kind of what the Hobbit is. It's there's good elements to it. But I actually, if I'm gonna compare Star Wars prequels to the Hobbit trilogy, Star Wars prequels are better. I'm gonna say it.
I'm gonna agree with you because frankly, I watched all the Star Wars prequels, and I enjoyed parts of it. I wasn't even willing to give the second two Hobbit movies a chance. That's how bad I thought the first one was.
Yeah, it was. So let's talk about why. At least let's focus on the first movie and talk about why it failed.
Well, the beginning of it starts out with basically the end of the Lord of the Rings. It's we're talking about.
Yeah, they've tried to make too strongly a connection there that was pointless.
And it took 20 minutes to do.
Yeah, the beginning exposition was ridiculously long.
And Tolkien has really long exposition in his books. But The Hobbit doesn't have a huge exposition.
Yeah, the exposition's one chapter.
It's pretty much hey, I'm Bilbo, and then, oh my god, there's dwarves at my doorstep, and then
it's
adventure.
It's supposed to be funny that Gandalf doesn't like his attitude, and so Gandalf is I was friends with your mother and with these other people. I'm going to take you on an adventure because I think it'll be good for you. and now we should do another video how basically every movie is... How should I put this? Every movie is just copying The Hobbit, the book, the original book. It's an extremely copied story. And it's an extremely... The particular story elements in it. Star Wars is just The Hobbit. The first Star Wars movie is literally just The Hobbit.
You mean every movie?
Every movie is just The Hobbit.
It's just The Hobbit.
Right,
okay.
But we can talk about that. Except for the movie The Hobbit, which isn't The Hobbit. And that's the big problem. Is I got to the end of the first movie. I'm like, what was so bad about Tolkien's beloved masterwork that we have to throw it away and write a different story that's worse? I don't understand. And so the first problem is the exposition. We didn't need it. We didn't need all the exposition. There's here's what it should have been. Gandalf shows up. We have a conversation from the book. The dwarves show up. Bilbo's frustrated. That's called Bambo or something. Bilbo's frustrated. They look at the map, and then Bilbo gets curious about it and decides, I'm going to do it because I don't want... And that's the exposition. It could have taken 15 minutes. Instead, it's literally... I'm trying to remember how long it was.
It's 20 minutes, and then
45 minutes.
And then 45 minutes. Yeah.
And then he's finally on the road. And in the meanwhile, you haven't laughed once at the situation, which is supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
There's a whole... And then you have this drastic change of tone from the first trilogy to the second one within the first 45 minutes. Drastic. To where the dwarves are doing this, they're throwing plates among their heads, and it's like a cartoon all of a sudden. And you're kind of like, what? Where did this come from? Like, I don't. I kind of get the sense from Tolkien's work that it's a little, it's a little more kid friendly. I guess it's for younger readers. Originally, he wrote it for his kids, and there's more silly stuff in The Hobbit, but to then connect it with the original trilogy and then kind of throw the tone out the window. Then after that exposition, it's not silly anymore, except in its ridiculously. Right?
Yeah, and it's unintended silliness.
And it's unintended unbelievableness.
Yeah. Well, and I think Thorin specifically is just completely misrepresented.
Oh, yeah. They wrecked all the characters. All the characters were, not only were they not like they were in the book, they undercut all the things the book is trying to deliver about all those characters through their mischaracterization of them.
Yeah. Well, and I think the dwarves are trying to be only like Gimli's comic relief parts in the Lord of the Rings, and not like his serious parts.
Yeah.
Because Gimli's serious plenty of the time in Lord of the Rings, but it's like, oh, everyone liked how funny Gimli was, so we're gonna make all the dwarves funny. It's like, well, but that was kind of the hobbits in the original incarnation of this story. The hobbits were funny, they weren't really serious, and this journey makes them more serious.
Yeah,
but they're still jovial.
Yeah, and in The Hobbit, the whole thing about Bilbo, I mean, let's finish the dwarves and then I'll talk about Bilbo. They have Thorin. Thorin in the book is this old dwarf. He was there for the destruction of his homeland, Erebor, and he's now old and wants to reclaim what's his. And his father, meanwhile, has gone insane from a Ring of Power, which. That's not really in the book, so it's not essential to the story, but it is a piece of lore that I guess they could have added in. In this, they made him young and heroic looking and not dwarvish at all.
Well, they did the same thing with Aragorn, right? Aragorn's supposed to be an old man also.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but he's not supposed to be an old man.
But it's like magic old man.
Yeah. Yeah, he's older. He's older than he looks, but it's like they made. Thorin is like 200 and some odd years old in The Hobbit, and it has a gray beard, and is rich and well respected, and has a history of fighting orcs and things like that.
Yeah.
And in this they tried to make him young and heroic looking, so that the audience would have some automatic appeal to him. As if we can't have an appeal to an older heroic person. Like, why can't someone
Gandalf?
Yeah, like Gandalf. Like, why can't we have someone who's old and heroic? Like, how are those two things not... I don't understand why they did that. But in the meanwhile, we made him young and heroic looking rather than old and flawed and greedy, which the whole point of The Hobbit is that, Thorin is consumed by his lust for what he's lost. And at the end, he understands that the finer things, the things in life that the Hobbit values, that Bilbo values, are the things he really should have considered. That the world would be a better place if we were gardeners and not warriors. Yeah. And that was a bit of Tolkien, and this Tolkien wrote it after World War I. And that's a bit of his perspective there. That it's like, when you focus so much on this material stuff, you forget about the living of life. Yeah. And Thorin only realizes that far too late. And they sort of try to do that in the movie, but they had this idea like the Arkenstone is driving it mad. We have him too heroic at the beginning, so he can't really be a tragic character. Mm-hmm. They completely crisscrossed all the themes with Thorin, and the other dwarves too. The other dwarves are, I don't know, they're a mixture of things. And the other thing is, when we see the dwarves fighting, we don't believe it. The choreography is too
It's too Yoda versus Count Dooku.
Yeah, it's too Yoda and Count Dooku. That's a great way of putting it. Where you're just like, what? I kind of, I remember watching Yoda and Count Dooku, and I'm like, well, that's kind of cool, but it's kind of dumb looking too. A CG Christopher Lee versus a CG Yoda.
Kermit the Frog.
Yeah, Kermit the Frog. Anyway, so you just don't believe it the whole way, and you see that in the first movie, like when they're fighting the goblins.
Or when they're fighting the trolls, which when they fight the trolls that happens at the very beginning of the book.
The trolls just like wreck them all instantly in the book. that the whole point, and you have to think about what that means story-wise, is that Tolkien had this first challenge there for him, and this is why the Tolkien structure is so cocky. He had this first challenge where they get owned, and the whole point is that they suck, and Bilbo is incompetent. Yeah. And the whole point of that little encounter is to show how incompetent they all are. Yeah. So that you have an idea like, they're not really heroes like going off to fight a dragon. Yeah. They're pretty incompetent. They can't even take care of a couple of trolls, and Gandalf has to make the sun magically rise. Yeah. You know, to have them survive this encounter. So then they look really competent against the trolls, which is the opposite of what you wanted in that point of the story. You wanted them to get the crap owned out of them. Yeah. And in the original, I think in the original Lord of the Rings, there is a point like that when like the Nazgul come into Bree and they have to run away from them, and when the Nazgul stab Frodo, they're getting the crap owned out of them from the like beginning to end of Fellowship of the Ring. Yeah,
there's
and beyond.
The only heroic point in Fellowship of the Ring is when Aragorn kills the orc. Yeah, that's the only sort of win.
And everybody else, otherwise you're just running away. And that was the whole point, is that like to have that story tension, to have this belief that you're in grave danger, you got to be running away from the crap. Yeah. And so they completely undermine that tone. Now I do want to talk about Bilbo though. Bilbo in Peter Jackson's movies, I hate him. Yeah. I think he's a repulsive character to me. I don't like watching him on screen. And it's not just that he doesn't match my idea of Bilbo, and he doesn't match the characteristics of Bilbo in the book. He literally makes me cringe when I watch him. It's not the matchup, it's that actor making that role different from what I think it was even written as in the screenplay.
Now, are you also including the same, because it was the same actor in Lord of the Rings, right?
No, it was a different actor. They had a different guy. Now the actor in Lord of the Rings, I'm trying to remember his name, I don't remember it, who played Bilbo. He did a really good job, I thought. And because Bilbo was cheerful and he was energetic and he was jovial and he had a positive spin on life. Yeah. This Bilbo that we get in Hobbit is depressed and anxious and full of being upset and sadness and
and what we like to call womp.
Yeah, he's just a womp character beginning to end, and it's like, well, it's about the hero's journey and he learns to grow. It's like, but you had that with a character who wasn't depressed the whole time. Yeah. Bilbo in the Hobbit was like pretty energetic. He didn't have a lot of self-confidence. He's like he's trying to prove himself to the dwarves, and they're like, go burgle something. And he's like, all right, I'm going to steal something from the troll. And the troll's like, what's that in my pocket? and then bam, they get the crap out of him by the trolls. And Bilbo's like, I'm pretty incompetent. But he never like despairs completely in the journey. And once he gets the ring, and once he saves the dwarves from like the elves, he really gains that confidence. And the hero's journey is in like full swing in the book. And he never has to stop and be completely depressed all the time. Like there's points where he's like, I'm in a bad situation now, but there's never a feeling that he's just beginning to end womping over everything. It's like Bilbo, and then like at the end of the first Hobbit movie, it's like, I need to go back. It's like, you can't go back, dude. You're on the other side of the Misty Mountains. Yeah. The time for self-doubt was long past. Yeah. And that scene is pointless. It's like, it's to make the audience feel that he still has this doubt. It's like, but it's not believable in the context of the story at all. He can't go back. So it doesn't matter if he has to, I make a tough decision. Am I going to go back? No. You can't make that. You can't make that decision.
It's not even on the table. And maybe that's what they thought was going to be cool. It's like, he's trying to make this decision that he absolutely can't make. And that's the Dark Night of the Soul, right? Well, Bilbo's journey is one of incompetence until he finds a magic ring that makes him invisible, and then suddenly he can he does crazy stuff. But his growth his growth doesn't happen in his attitude. You know, his attitude is maybe in his confidence, but he's always still Bilbo. And it seems like in the movie he's not Bilbo, and then maybe eventually he becomes Bilbo. But like I said, I never get the chance.
Yeah, the big growth in the book is when Bilbo takes the Arkenstone and uses it against his friends to try to stop war. Yeah. That he's like elevated his perspective, so that he's like, I have to be able to stop my friends from being rash, because I really have grown to see what their flaws are, and I no longer feel like an incompetent sack of potatoes. So there's a lot to the book in that growth curve. I don't know why and the thing is, like, you have this story structure that's been infinitely copied, and you have access to the original material.
Yeah, it should have been a slam dunk.
It should have been a slam dunk, and the fact that they beefed it so hard is like beyond my understanding.
Yeah.
Now, should we?
Well, I want to mention the actor who plays Bilbo in The Hobbit, Martin Friedman, I believe his name is, and I think he's a great actor, but this was not a good cast for him.
Yeah, it was not a good working of the character.
He does much better in these like somber roles where his snark actually comes from how somber he is. If you've seen the BBC Sherlock, he plays Watson, and he's fantastic in that role. But as Bilbo, did not work. So this is not really a dig at the actor. I really think it's a dig in the casting decisions. Which, if we're comparing it to the original trilogy, it's still the same thing. It's the casting decisions. Yeah, it's just not right.
It's a dig on the direction too, because anytime he was shooting that scene, if I were the director, I'd be like, dude, this isn't right. And if I had shot enough scenes with him that weren't right, I would have been like, we need to recast him and shoot. It's nothing against you, but you're not doing this character right. This character is supposed to have an upbeat attitude, and that he's constantly getting owned. Right? That's what Bilbo is.
And now, just to continue on the direction idea, is Guillermo del Toro was actually originally on the screenwriting panel for this, and I don't remember
they took
when or why they took him off.
I don't know the whole story of why, but Guillermo del Toro got booted off the project at some point. He was going to direct, and it didn't happen. But it's hard to know what he touched on the screenplay that remained. I do know that if we look at all three screenplays together, they inserted a bunch of irrelevant crap because they felt like The Hobbit only has an A story.
We need a B and a C story.
Yeah, we need a B and a C story. So
we listen to our screenplay stuff. We talk about that all the time.
Yeah, it's like, well, The Hobbit just has this A story. We need to insert a B and a C story. So the B story is like this: let's get Sauron out of this tower, which they completely beefed on. It was a terrible iteration of that. It had no meaningful ramp up or conflict.
And then they have Radagast in there for some reason.
And then there's the C story is, let's make one of the elves in love with one of the dwarves. We'll conjure an elf out of the mist like a warlock, and then we'll make her be in love with one of the dwarves. A romance which has never happened in the lore. And it doesn't I mean, like, you could do that, but it felt so inserted and kind of pointless.
Well,
and then they inserted Legolas in there too. They're like, let's have Legolas. Legolas is jumping on the heads of the dwarves this is in the second movie, I think. He's jumping on the heads of the dwarves, like killing all the orcs with his crazy bow skills and his infinite
quiver.
Infinite quiver. And I'm watching it with my wife, and she goes, "What the hell is this?" Now, my wife loves like Marvel movies and stuff, and this completely broke her like any kind of immersion that she had that this could actually be happening. It's like, I get that Legolas is a badass warrior. I don't believe you'd have to. I don't believe anyone would do this. Like, if he was a god, he could do it, but a god wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Why? Well, so we're pretty much out of time, but
That's our main take on it.
My last
the pacing was off too. Everything about it was bad. Yeah. I mean, we could go on for like hours about how.
My last impression is just Bilbo down like with the Goblin King, and I'm just like,
yeah. And the goblins weren't orcs; they were like weird cartoon goblins. And the last thing is like they inserted the white orc chasing them for like the last battle to like make that happen. And it's like as if there wasn't enough conflict in the constant danger they're in from beginning to end. Like, I just don't know why. It's like, you're being hunted. It's like, how did he know where they were? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why would this orc know where they were and be able to track them and be able to, why would he go through all this effort and then then he like leads a battle at the end. And in the book, it's like the battle at the end is the orcs are like from the mountains that we met before are like, guys, there's a lot of gold there. The dragon's dead. Let's go get it.
Yeah.
And so that's what begins the battle, and it makes sense. Things make sense in the book. It's as if somebody created a piece of art with the intention that all the parts of the story led up to the conclusion. It's almost like he did that, and then they took that and like, here's the slam dunk of a perfect hero's journey that's been copied a million times, and they're like, well, we don't need the source for everybody's ideas. Let's do something better. And no, it was bad. All right, you can find me at DBS Press. You can find me at dvspress.com, davidvstewart.com.
You can find me at matthewjwellman.com.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Later.